I get a lot of questions about why our firm, the firm that I run that serves agencies, why do we serve agencies? Why do we pick that segment of the economy to do the kind of work that we do? We could do intellectual property work for lots of different kinds of businesses. We could do contract negotiation for lots of different kinds of firms. The reason for me personally, and I don't really talk about this a lot, but is that I think agencies, marketing service firms, whatever you'd like to call yourself, are in a unique position of being able to move commerce and culture. And I love having a business that serves them because we get a front row seat to all the creativity that you all employ to create differences for your clients, whether that's an economic difference, whether it's furthering a cause, whether it's just creating something that's cool and that the world needs to see or have. And so I'm really excited to talk to today's guest. Jim Scott is CEO and a co-founder of Mono in Minneapolis. And they're living and breathing an example of what I love to see and get us. I'm so privileged to see all the time when I work with our clients of impact. And so, Jim, thank you so much for making the time to talk with me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you for having me on your show. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. So let's talk a little bit about Mono initially to kind of set the table. Award-winning agency, acknowledged by the trade press for your work by Ad Age, by 4As, all the accolades, right? A lot of hard work that led to that, no doubt. But you're a successful agency, technically a small agency, although you'd probably seem huge to some of our audience. But tell us a little bit about kind of your focus at the agency, or sort of what your purpose is in providing the services that you do to your clients.
I guess in the broadest sense, we describe ourselves as a strategically driven, creatively minded agency. So that's kind of what we do. So everything we do is grounded in the work of strategy and strategists, and our pursuit is creativity. We get hired by brands of all size at all, in all sort of stages of wherever they may be in their business cycle, to put brands out into the world and get consumers to love them, interact with them, want to be a part of them, all of those things. And we've done everything from, work with some of the biggest brands on the planet, from Google to Target to, Sperry and the Topsider brand, all the way down to little tiny brands that we invented from scratch. Boom Chicka Pop. If you walk the snack aisle in any grocery store, we named it, invented it, designed it, 100% of it. So all of that is what we think is kind of our world and what we do.
Love the kettle corn. I could eat a whole bag of it in one sitting if I let myself. It's awesome. So there's so much we could talk about, and I'm sure so many experiences you and your team have had bringing brands up off the ground and launching them, growing them. But I'm privileged. I think we both are to have a chance today to talk a little bit about impact, right? I think is as much swagger, I guess, as agencies and agency people can seem to have sometimes. If you've ever spent any time at an agency conference, you see it all over the place. But as much as that is kind of part of the way the industry works, my personal experience, and I don't know if this is your observation too or not, Jim, but agency people tend to be a little over humble about the impact that they can make in terms of what they're creating. I have a lot of persuasion conversations with agencies about harnessing their intellectual property to create either multiple revenue streams or think about their business model differently. And they further causes, they get candidates elected, they create a lot of impact that goes beyond what the public traditionally thinks of as marketing and advertising, right? So you're all in a unique position to do big, great things, but they don't always own it. But Mono is owning it. And one example of how you're owning it is your brand and residence program. And I really want to talk about this because it's to me such a cool example of taking your ability, your privilege, your position, and using it to bring someone else up behind you, to grow, their voice, their vision, their business in the world. So how did you get the idea to start it? What drove the decision to sort of create this? What is it exactly? And what's kind of is your goal for the impact that you wanted to see it make?
You know, there's a long story and there's a short story. So I'll try to put the two together, and maybe it's a medium story.
Yeah.
But we were approached by five young people, and I'll call them kids, but they're 25, and they were putting together. They literally said, "We want to build an agency. We want to do what you're doing." What was sort of immensely unique about them is that they were from very diverse backgrounds. They were BIPOC in every way. They grew up on the north side of Minneapolis and all around, so not necessarily in all the places that people in our industry tend to come from. But what was more unique than all of that, in some unfortunate ways, but in ways that they did some amazing things, is they were a part of the George Floyd, protest, and that happened right in our city, right in our town, and they were on that Highway 35 when that truck drove through. I don't know if you recall watching that on the news. Just this horrific event,
I do.
and it changed them dramatically. And they decided to use their creativity for good. So they came down to, frankly, our part of the neighborhood. Everything was boarded up. It was just a bad place to sort of be at times. And they started painting on boarded up stores and like just expressing what was happening to them and their and sort of where they're coming from. A business owner approached them and said, "God, I love what you guys are doing. Could we do a collab together on a drink, a little coffee drink?"
Mm-hmm.
And these light bulbs started firing off, and they started to realize that they could use creativity for good. It wasn't like they weren't doing good at the moment, but they were like, "We're creative people. Why can't we go do something with this?"
Mm-hmm.
Shorten the story up, they were introduced to us and they came into our office and they're like, "Hey, we want to learn how you guys do what you do." And we thought about it for about half a second. And I said, "Why don't you just come and work with us? Why don't you just sit here? Why don't you just grab a table? We have an open space. We have some room. Why don't you guys just hang out with us?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to know something about what we're doing, let's talk about it." And they were awesome. And they have a brand. They're called the Skin Tones. They have a line of merchandise. They're working with NFL players now. They've got this really awesome start to what they're doing. But they really were the inspiration for ultimately an idea that came to us, which was like, why don't we do this for any entrepreneur that's in their sort of in a very similar place, where they don't have the resources, they don't have the background, they don't necessarily know how to do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
So let's invite them in, like physically invite them in to spend their days with us, to use our space, to use our office, to use everything we have, in addition to our people who are really, really good at what they do. During all of what was happening during George Floyd and everything that happened after, the big companies could write the checks. They could sponsor, X, Y, and Z. They could host, these massive conferences and do the things that small companies, we had to ask, like, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
So it became evident, like, this is something we can do. And in so many ways, it's difficult because you have to open up your space. You have to say, come on in. You have to use all of our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Use our conference rooms, hold your meetings here, build your business here. But the easy part was to simply say, it's not that hard. We can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the idea came from. And we just, this past fall, we officially invited the next group into our office. And it's a young entrepreneur who started a business in the thrifting space. It's a technology platform. He's working out of his apartment. He's got, a wife. He's got two kids that are in the background. It's crazy town, and he's trying to get a business off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes into our office, and he's got sanity. He's got technology, but he's also got our people. And he can tap any one of us, anyhow, anywhere, any way.
Mhm.
and work to help him grow his business. So I don't know if that was the long story or the short story, but try to make it a medium story.
Well, I no, I love it's fascinating background to me, and it does give you good feels, right? And I know it's also got some agency owners thinking who are listening to this, that is really cool and that is terrific. And I cannot imagine the amount of structure or organization or bandwidth that might take for me to do something to have that kind of impact, even if it isn't a program like that. So I guess what I want to ask you about is how did you go from inspiration, which was this first group of young people who you met and wanted to raise up with you, into sort of, I don't want to say institutionalizing it, that's too corporate a word, I think, for what you did. But how did you go to sort of create some structure around this so that you can know who you're going to help, how exactly you're going to make your resources available to them? And the reason I'm asking that is because I'm guessing an agency owner might be thinking, what if we wanted to sort of engage with our community in this way or in our industry in this way, but we really don't know how to start or what to do first or what to plan for, and how to avoid disruption to our business because we got to keep the lights on too. So how did you start? I mean, what did you think of first? I have a lot of questions like how do you find the right people to help? And then how did you create whatever systems or sort of structure, however loose it might be, so that this wouldn't disrupt the rest of your business along the way?
I think in my mind, it's easier than maybe everyone might think. But I do think the starting point is probably to truly as a business and not just through ownership, but everybody in the business, like understand that there's a role that your business, your company can play in affecting change. So I think you have to be like, this isn't about a veneer. It's not about like, hey, that would be super cool. We can tell other people about. It's like, do you really believe in change and helping that change come to be? Then I think that's the starting point. So for us, it was easy. It's like, yes, there's a problem. We can help and we'd like to, and we'd like that help to be of impact, not just sort of
Mhm.
performative, if you will. So yes, you have to start there. You then very quickly have to get your head around the idea. It's not unlike having the in-laws over. It's like they're in your house. Like, come on in, take your shoes off, or whatever your house rules might be. But for the most part, they're in your house and you got to be okay with that.
Right.
And you can't say, well, you're off limits. Please don't go in the living room, whatever it might be. It's like, come on in, use the space. You have to accept that as sort of number two. And then number three, you have to be really clear on like what your agency does and then search for people that need that. So when we were putting out, and it was a simple entry sort of like, it was like an application process. We're like, consumer facing brands that use social media, use digital media, brands that are typically under leveraged and have really strong ideas at the center of their business. So when we opened up the application process, we asked 10, 15, 20 questions. It was an essay kind of thing.
Okay.
And so part of that was that we wanted people that were truly engaged in building their business, that were truly engaged in this idea of growing from one or two or three people to something much bigger. So it was a bit of its own little like test. It's like fill up. It's a long little application, so fill it out. And we got probably 12 to 15 like really awesome like applications, and then we went through them, narrowed it to four. Then we had one-on-ones with the four. So they would come into the space, we'd meet them one-on-one, we'd talk with them, we'd tell them about us, we'd learn about them. And it was truly about trying to find a really good fit for the things we know, the things they need, culture, personality, just whatever it might be. And then we selected our one guy, and he's starting literally from the ground up. He's got venture capital he's raising, he's got a technology platform he's building. Um, it's all kind of, it's got to fit and it's got to work. It's got to start again. You got to like believe that you can make change in the world. It starts there.
Mhm. And how do you sort of systematize this individual's access to make sure he's getting the right people he needs help from or the right resources? Is there a liaison that the agency has to sort of make sure that this entrepreneur is not spinning wheels, is actually getting to take advantage of the right help and the right resources at the right time?
Absolutely. There we have a main point of contact.
Okay.
It's a woman that runs our office as well as everything else.
Yeah, I have one of those too.
Yeah, and she's amazing, and she believes in the program as much as anybody. So, Jake Webb is our guy. His main point of contact is very clear to him. And then secondly, I have a standing every other week hour meeting with Jake, and sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's in the office, but I make myself available. And I'm curious about his business. I want to know what's next. I want to know what he's working on. So I think the other part of the structure is that, someone in your leadership team has to be highly invested in the program as well,
Mhm.
because that's how you can learn and understand what does Jake need now. So he's building an app. He's got a beta that's ready to go. He's truly trying to build the social foundation for when he launches, so that he's got followers, that he has people interacting with his web. So in a number of conversations, knowing that was sort of step one for him, I've connected him with our director of social media. And I'm like, please, the two of you, I'd like you to meet and work this out. And he was in our office last week and we chatted for a good amount of time. And this young woman who does run a lot of our strategy walks by, and there was a fist bump, and she looks at Jake and like, you're killing it. And it was just this affirmation that he's following her lead to say, those are the things you got to do. But I would never have known, and Jake would never have known, like, how do you make that happen? So you have to have someone vested in the relationship to say, oh, you should talk to so-and-so next.
Mhm.
He's bringing on a venture capitalist, I should say venture capital investment. And we've done that in the past. And I was able to sit with Jake and said, you got to be sharp on these two fronts. You got to be asking about this particular piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
And he's like, that's a great idea. I should definitely do that. So, yeah, it definitely takes coordination, but I would say it takes, investment, from inside. It takes the investment of ownership and someone in the agency to say, I'm going to be invested in this individual.
Okay. So do you see yourself doing this sort of serially, taking on one brand and residence at a time and sort of putting a fence around maybe how long the journey might be between you both and then helping somebody else? Or or are you planning to scale it and help more entrepreneurs at the same time? Or what is your vision for how you're going to expand it?
At the moment, we've talked about a more serial kind of approach
Yeah.
where we were clear with Jake, said, okay, this is 6 months. This gets you
Yeah.
up and running. We do the things that we do. We help you. And then we want you to be standing on your own two legs and off and running.
Yeah.
The more I've gotten to know Jake and the life cycle of his project, I'm not going to kick him out the door in 6 months. He's got a lot
Yeah.
of work to do, and I think it's awesome, and he's super motivated. And so Jake's going to go nowhere. So then we may layer another one on top of what Jake is doing. I think it really depends on the business, the cycle of the business, et cetera. I do think at some point, our advice, our counsel, the things that we can help them with, we will do that. But then the business has to stand on its own.
Yeah.
So, and Jake is welcome to use our place. He does. He hosts meetings. He uses our, technology, platforms or what have you. But he doesn't need a massive office space. But if there's a time when he does, when he's got 10, 15, 20 employees, whatever that is, he's got to build a business so he can stand on his own 2 feet.
Right.
We can't be that for him. And I've made that super clear to him.
Yeah.
But I think we have the capacity to have multiple businesses just like Jake's in and amongst our people working right alongside of us
Mm.
and tapping us from time to time. The thing that I've made very clear to Jake is like, this is on him. He comes in and he has to run a business and he has to understand what's next. And then he has to come find, me or KDZ who kind of runs it and takes care of the business of the business. But it's really important that Jake is fully engaged. And he's like, next up is this. How do I handle this?
Mhm.
I've got a, he's working on a beta right now as he's building this out, and when the time is right, he's going to come to me saying, okay, I'm ready to I want to expose your designers to what we're doing because I'd love to get their thoughts on it. We're at wireframe, we're moving through the UI right now, but there's going to be a moment. But it's going to be on him to say, these are the moments I need. So he has to be equally invested in it.
Right, right. Well, so I'm definitely pulling from our conversation some themes about considerations any agency would need to have if they're going to create some sort of engagement for impact initiative, whatever that might be, whether it's you're going to organize a conversation series for some of your key clients or up and coming entrepreneurs in a particular industry or agency happens to serve, or whether that is giving students access to opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have, whatever that looks like to you, whether it's the industry, your community. Here's kind of, Jim, what I'm hearing from you. Leadership's got to be invested, personally invested, in the initiative, so that it's authentic and that gets socialized and culturalized throughout the agency. I'm hearing it's a good idea to also have a point person who probably isn't the leader of the agency to make sure that all the stuff that needs to happen to run this initiative, whatever it might be, gets done, right? And that you're actually doing what you say you're going to do to help. And that there needs to be clear expectations and boundaries between the agency and whomever the beneficiary is of the initiative about what your journey together is going to be. That maybe that's the amount of time it's going to take, maybe that's the amount of resources you're willing to invest, whatever it looks like for you. But it feels like those are like the key components that you need to be thinking about, and those could apply to a lot of different types of ways the agency wants to get engaged for impact.
Yeah, I think you did a nice job of summarizing it. And part of what we're doing is we're learning too. So, as we've invited, Jake in with his project, like, are the things that he needs that we weren't thinking about, are the things that, he would like access to that we don't necessarily have access to give him, and whatever those might be. So, and a lot of it, because it's such a young business, he's learning as he goes too. So I think we're going to learn a lot along the way. One of the things that's, and just the kind of back to kind of how you sort of framed how people can contribute. One of the things that we were laser focused on was businesses that are building and growing. So there's internships, absolutely. They're all over the place, right? And we've participated in those things too, but the impact of those students, so to speak, is years away. And it's awesome, and you got to start someplace. So one of the things that we focused on was how can we have the most impact in the shortest amount of time possible. So now as we help Jake, and he has told me, his stated long-term objective is he wants to go back as a venture capitalist and invest in other BIPOC businesses once he makes it big. And I think that's awesome, because that is where, true societal impact can happen, as opposed to, bringing up and again, I love the student work. I've taught at the university level. I just think that is some of the most amazing and rewarding things you can do. But our program is absolutely about impact, and how can we have impact immediately, so that Jake a year from now can go back to his alma mater, his high school, and he can talk to the kids there and say, look what I did. And that, I think, will have a sea change for so many kids as they look to, figure out what they want to do.
Well, and it's a fact of life in a capitalist economy that impact extends from income, it extends from resources. And so in this case, with your initiative, the byproduct will be a profitable business that will then create the resources to bring up and help to rise other profitable businesses. So it's, you need the resources to make the impact in many ways. And again, this is where I say agencies are in such a unique situation because they understand strategy and creativity and commerce. And while they're working on all that, they're creating art at the same time. So there's really no other industry or very few other industries that are in the unique position that you're all in to create this kind of impact. And I want to make sure we get this in because you and I talked about this briefly before we before we hit record to have this conversation. This is not an arrangement wherein the agency is sort of providing a service to invest in a client business, because there's a lot of that. Like you mentioned earlier, there's incubators where agencies will create and stand up businesses and take a stake in those businesses. This is, you have no stake financially in this Brandon residence. And it's just about giving them the business assets and expertise that they need to do what they need to do to grow or get off the ground, right?
Yeah, in fact, I think that's incredibly important that, if anyone wants to do and what we are doing, that there should be no commercial gain for the agency itself. And I think it's just one of the roles as a business that, has been, blessed. We're fortunate, all those sorts of things. Like this is just something that we're doing because we believe that the problem is so great and our impact, our ability to have an impact it has to come from a very genuine place of like, it's not about skin in the game,
Right.
and that we have something to, and we could have done that. That would have been easy. And I think a lot of CPG brands do that. They have these little incubators. So they want to be first on shelf. They want to talk about the stories that they can talk about their, support of these communities, but they also want to have that product on the shelf.
Yeah.
Ours is less, less focused on that as an outcome and more just on the pure success of the entities the businesses we're going to work with.
And I think you may still maintain the purity as an agency if you happen to be able to create a really cool case study out of this. There's nothing wrong with that. You still helped a cause, or you
Oh, for
helped
sure.
a group, or whatever you did. You had impact, and I think it's great to talk about it because everybody deserves credit for that story and that ending, right? But that's different than propping up others as sort of adjacent to your main business. So I think that it's important to draw a distinction between the two.
I'd agree. Yeah. And we do pro bono work in other ways. We worked with the American Red Cross, for example, and they had a hard time reaching a very young demographic because during COVID, there was no blood donating on campus. So there's a whole cohort that sort of didn't get the memo that giving blood is a good idea.
Yeah.
So we worked really, really hard with the American Red Cross, and we had a campaign that drove young people to donate blood, and it was hugely successful. So we do that work. And to your point about creativity, we're able to use creativity in that fashion for that particular organization against a really important cause. This one comes at it just differently. And it's about how can we, as just a business standing up in a community, give back without doing creative work per se, or creating a campaign per se, or trying to put creative object, soon to be case study out into the world. It's just like, how can we make a difference?
Right.
And I think this is a really powerful way to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, agencies underestimate their ability to make a difference like this. And so I'm glad you're giving them an illustration of how it could work for them at any scale. Maybe they can't take on an entrepreneur and everything that they need, like Mono's able to do, but there are other versions of that, right? Depending on the focus of that particular business or the size of its resources at any given time. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's forever businesses would have, okay, we're gonna Thursday's our volunteer day, we're gonna close and we're gonna go clean the park or whatever, and you could take your people and just the humanness of people and go do things. You can work at community centers, at food shelves. You can, do a cleanup in a park, whatever those things are. That absolutely. This is another way to look at like the skill set in your building as a similar resource.
Mhm.
and giving it in a way to someone that's coming from a background that isn't necessarily, privileged, and giving them a resource they'd never have access to in another way. So
Right.
in so many ways, it is about giving back, but using a very unique, and to your point about agencies and how we're wired and the people we employ, like have so many unique talents, yet not everybody has access to that. So how can you give more people access to it?
Yeah. I love it. It's an awesome impact story. It's an awesome inclusion story. And it's just a great example of the power that businesses in this industry really have to create change and difference. And so thanks so much for sharing this experience with on the podcast with everyone who's listening. And I'm hoping everybody's taking away a kernel of it to think about what it can mean for their impact, either on their communities or their industry or however they want to measure it. So I really appreciate you sharing your expertise today, Jim. And if other agencies want to learn more about Mono's work or maybe about the Brand and Residence program, where are some good places for them to find you and it?
Well, you can certainly go to our website. You can learn all about us there. We don't promote this,
Oh,
honestly. It's not something that like appears on a big page on our website, and we talk about different things.
got it.
If anyone wants to connect directly and talk about how we're doing, I'd be happy to do so. So just hit me up on LinkedIn. That'd be a great way to do it. And whether it's 6 months or a year from now, and Jake has gone off and made all his money, and he's hugely famous, or whatever's going to happen to Jake, we'll have a lot more to talk about then too. But for the time being, if anyone wants to know how we're doing it and what we're learning along the way, I'd be happy to connect with anyone.
Awesome. Jim Scott, Mono, thank you so much for joining me on Innovative Agency today. It was really good to talk with you.
Great. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk to the rest of you on the next episode. And until then, stay well.